The morning air bit at Peter's face as he walked down Fifth Avenue. Despite the costly wool coat wrapped around his tall frame, the December chill found its way to his skin. People rushed past him, heads down, hurrying to work or somewhere important. Peter had nowhere urgent to be today. His company practically ran itself these days, giving him the luxury of time that his wealth had promised but rarely delivered. Peter turned the corner and spotted the community center where he'd been volunteering for the past few months. It wasn't something he talked about at business dinners or charity galas. This was different, something he did because it filled a growing emptiness that his success couldn't touch. "Morning, Mr. Reynolds," called out Hank, the center's security guard. The older man's smile warmed the cold day a bit. "Just Peter, please," he replied with a genuine smile. "How's your grandson doing with those college applications?" Hank beamed. "Got his first acceptance letter yesterday. That scholarship you told us about really helped." Peter nodded, feeling that familiar flutter of satisfaction that came from actually helping someone rather than just writing checks. He'd found the scholarship program through his company's education foundation. But he never mentioned to Hank that he'd made a call to ensure the application received proper attention. Inside the center, the usual morning chaos greeted him. The smell of industrial coffee and reheated breakfast foods filled the air. Volunteers bustled around, setting up tables and organizing donated clothes. Peter grabbed an apron from the hook and tied it around his waist. "Thank goodness you're here, Rita," the center coordinator said, as she rushed past with a stack of paperwork. "We're short-handed today and the breakfast crowd is bigger than usual." Cold snap drove more people in. Peter nodded and headed toward the serving line. He'd been coming here every Tuesday for nearly 4 months now, ever since his therapist had suggested he find purpose outside his business empire. At first he'd felt awkward and out of place, a tech millionaire serving oatmeal to people experiencing homelessness. But the discomfort had faded as faces became familiar and he learned names and stories. He took his place behind the scrambled eggs, serving spoon in hand. The line formed quickly, men and women of all ages, some with children, their breath visible in the still cold building. Peter had learned not to let pity show on his face. These people didn't want it, and many of them had a quiet dignity that he'd come to respect deeply. "Morning, Mr. Reynolds," said a man with a gray beard who came through every week. "Market treating you well?" Peter smiled at the irony of discussing stocks while serving breakfast at a shelter. "Can't complain, Joe. How's the job hunt going?" "Got an interview tomorrow. Warehouse work, but it's something." Joe moved down the line, making room for others. The breakfast rush continued for nearly an hour. Peter worked methodically, making sure portions were generous. He noticed a woman he hadn't seen before waiting patiently at the end of the line. She stood with perfect posture, her clothes worn but clean, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Despite the circumstances, there was something composed about her that caught his attention. When she reached him, she looked up with clear brown eyes. "Thank you," she said simply as he served her eggs. "You're welcome," Peter replied, surprised by the warmth in her voice. "First time here?" She nodded, a flash of embarrassment crossing her face. "Is it that obvious?" "No," he said quickly. "I just know most of the regulars." He glanced at the line behind her. "Hope the food helps." She gave a small smile and moved on. Peter watched her find a seat alone at the corner table, noticing how she arranged her napkin on her lap before eating, like someone dining at an expensive restaurant rather than a community center. After the breakfast rush, Peter helped clean up. Rita approached him as he wiped down counters. "Could you help sort some of the new clothing donations?" she asked. "We got a huge batch from that department store yesterday, and we're trying to organize before the afternoon crowd." Peter agreed and headed to the back room where donations were processed. To his surprise, the woman from breakfast was there, carefully folding sweaters and organizing them by size. "You're volunteering?" he asked without thinking. She looked up, recognition crossing her face. "Oh, the egg server," a slight smile. "No. Rita offered me a chance to help out in exchange for using the shower facilities before everyone else." Seemed fair. Peter nodded, feeling slightly embarrassed for assuming. He introduced himself, extending his hand. "Peter Reynolds." She hesitated before taking it. "Leah Collins." They worked side by side for nearly an hour, sorting through winter clothes. Peter noticed how Leah handled each item with care, sometimes running her fingers over the fabrics with what looked like professional assessment. "This is good quality," she murmured, holding up a navy blue coat. Wool blend, probably retailed for over $200. Peter raised an eyebrow. You know fashion? A shadow crossed Leah's face. I used to design clothes in another life. Peter's curiosity piqued, but he sensed her reluctance to elaborate. They continued working in comfortable silence until Rita poked her head in. Peter, there's a call for you at the front desk. Something about a meeting? He frowned, checking his watch. He'd forgotten about the investor call his assistant had scheduled. Thanks, Rita. I'll be right there. Before leaving, he turned to Leah. It was nice meeting you. She nodded, already turning back to the clothes. Likewise, Mr. Reynolds. Just Peter, he corrected gently. The call took longer than expected, forcing Peter to leave without saying goodbye to Leah. All through the afternoon, as he sat in his penthouse office overlooking the city, her face kept appearing in his thoughts. A former designer, now homeless, there was a story there. One he found himself wanting to know. The following Tuesday, Peter arrived at the center earlier than usual, looking around for Leah. He spotted her helping an elderly man find a suitable jacket from the donation rack. This one will keep you warm, she was saying, holding up a thick parka. The downfilling is still good, see how it puffs up? The man nodded gratefully, taking the coat with gnarled hands. Peter waited until she was alone before approaching. You have a good eye. Leah turned, surprise briefly flickering across her face. Oh, hello again. Just common sense, really. Matching needs to resources. Are you staying nearby? He asked, immediately regretting the personal question when her expression closed off. The women's shelter on 8th when there's space, she answered cautiously. Sometimes here in the overflow cots when it's too full. Peter nodded, unsure how to continue without seeming intrusive. He was saved when Rita called everyone to help set up breakfast. Over the next few weeks, Peter found himself looking forward to Tuesdays more than any other day. He and Leah fell into an easy rhythm of working together. She gradually shared pieces of her story, her successful small design business that had failed during the economic downturn, the medical bills that depleted her savings after an accident, the slow slide into housing insecurity that had shocked her with its speed and finality. The hardest part is how invisible you become, she told him one day as they organized donated toiletries. People who used to respect my work literally look through me now. Peter understood invisibility differently. People saw his wealth, not him, but he didn't compare their situations. Instead, he listened, finding himself increasingly drawn to her resilience and perspective. On a snowy Tuesday in January, Peter arrived at the center to find Leah wasn't there. Rita mentioned she hadn't seen her in 3 days. Worry gnawed at him through his shift. When he finished volunteering, instead of heading to his usual lunch meeting, he found himself walking through the nearby streets, looking for her familiar figure. He finally spotted her outside a public library, her hands tucked into threadbare gloves as she read job listings posted on the community board. Leah? He called, relief washing over him. She turned, surprise and then something like embarrassment crossing her face. Her cheek had a small bruise. Peter, what are you doing here? You weren't at the center. I was concerned, she shrugged, looking away. There was an incident at the shelter. I decided to avoid that area for a while. Peter felt anger rise at the implication. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced down to see a text from his assistant. Victoria's wedding invitation arrived. RSVP needed, Victoria, his ex-fiancée who had left him for a business rival 2 years ago. The woman who had claimed Peter was emotionally unavailable and obsessed with success. The invitation wasn't a surprise, they shared too many social connections for him to be excluded, but it still stung. Looking back up at Leah, standing proud despite her circumstances, an idea formed in Peter's mind. It was impulsive, probably inappropriate, definitely unconventional, yet somehow it felt right. Leah, he said suddenly, I have a strange request. Would you join me for coffee? There's something I'd like to ask you. She studied him, wariness and curiosity mingling in her gaze. After a long moment, she nodded. I could use something warm to drink. As they walked toward the cafe across the street, Peter wondered if he was about to make a terrible mistake or start something extraordinary. Either way, his predictable life had just veered into uncharted territory, and for the first time in years he felt truly awake. The cafe was warm and busy, filled with the rich smell of coffee and the gentle hum of conversation. Peter guided Leah to a quiet corner table, noticing how she took everything in with careful eyes. He watched as she removed her worn gloves slowly, almost reluctantly exposing her hands to the warmth. "Order anything you'd like," Peter said, handing her the menu. Leah glanced at it briefly. "Just plain coffee is fine. And to eat?" Peter pressed gently. "The sandwiches here are excellent." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "A sandwich would be nice." "Thank you." When the waitress came, Peter ordered them both the special, turkey and avocado on sourdough, and coffee. Silence settled between them as they waited, not uncomfortable but expectant. Leah's eyes drifted to the window, watching snowflakes begin to fall outside. "Your bruise," Peter finally said. "Are you okay?" Leah's hand rose to her cheek automatically. "It's nothing serious. A disagreement at the shelter. Space is tight and tempers get short. I'm sorry that happened to you," she shrugged. "It's just life at the moment. Temporary." The way she said it with firm conviction made Peter believe she truly saw her situation as a passing phase, not a permanent state. Their food arrived, and Peter watched as Leah took a measured bite, clearly savoring it but trying not to appear too eager. He waited until she'd eaten half her sandwich before speaking again. "I received an invitation today," he began, feeling suddenly foolish about what he was about to propose. "My ex-fiancée is getting married next month." Leah looked up, curious. "And that bothers you?" "Not in the way you might think," Peter replied honestly. "Victoria and I weren't right for each other. But she left me for a business competitor and the whole thing became gossip for our social circle." "The rich have their own problems," Leah observed, but her tone wasn't unkind. Peter smiled slightly. "Different problems, maybe. The invitation includes a +1 and I'm expected to attend. These circles are small and connections matter in business." Leah took a sip of her coffee. "So you need a date." "I'd like to ask you to be my guest," Peter said, the words coming out in a rush. Leah stared at him, coffee cup frozen halfway to her mouth. Slowly she set it down. "Me? Why?" It was a fair question, and Peter found himself searching for the right answer. The truth was complex. Yes, part of him wanted to show up with someone unexpected, to prove to Victoria and everyone else that he'd moved on. But there was more to it. "Because I enjoy your company," he said finally. "Because you're intelligent and insightful and would handle that world better than most people I know who were born into it." "I don't have anything to wear to a society wedding," Leah said, her voice flat. "That part is easy to solve. I don't want charity." "Peter, it's not charity," he countered. "Think of it as a business arrangement. You'd be doing me a favor and I'd compensate you for your time." A flash of hurt crossed her face. "I'm not for hire." Peter realized his mistake immediately. That came out wrong. "I know what you meant," she interrupted, her voice low but firm. "You want to shock your ex and your fancy friends by bringing someone from the other side of life." "No," Peter said, leaning forward. "That's not it at all." Leah's eyes searched his, looking for deception. "Then what is it?" Peter took a deep breath. "For months I've been going through the motions. Work meetings, charity events, all of it feels empty. When I volunteer at the center, when I talk with you, I feel connected to something real. The wedding is in the Hamptons, a weekend affair. I'm not asking you to pretend to be something you're not. Just to be yourself, the person who sees through the superficial nonsense better than anyone I know." Leah sat back, considering. "And after the wedding? Back to the shelter?" The question stung as it was meant to. "I'd like to help you find housing, a job in design again. Not because of the wedding, but because you deserve a chance to rebuild. And if I say no to the wedding but yes to the help, the offer stands either way," Peter said without hesitation. "But I'd really like you to come with me." Leah was quiet for a long time, breaking off small pieces of her remaining sandwich but not eating them. Finally she looked up. "I'll need more than a dress. I'll need a place to prepare to become presentable." Hope rose in Peter's chest. "I have a guest apartment in my building. It's yours to use, starting today if you want." "I haven't said yes yet," Leah reminded him, but a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "But you're considering it?" She nodded slowly. "I am. On one condition." "Name it." "I want to be clear with everyone that I'm attending as your friend, not pretending to be your girlfriend or anything more. No lies." Peter felt relief wash over him. "Absolutely. Just friends." "And I'd like to find something to contribute at this wedding," she added. "I don't want to just stand around feeling out of place. Maybe I could help with something." "Victoria's marrying Dylan Hayes. His family owns Hayes Hotels. The wedding is at their Hampton property. I'm sure there's something useful you could do if you wanted." Leah nodded, apparently satisfied. "Okay then. Yes, I'll go with you." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Peter arranged for Leah to move into the guest apartment in his building, a comfortable one-bedroom space that she initially found overwhelming. "All this for one person?" she'd asked, standing in the spacious living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Peter had simply smiled, leaving her to settle in. He made sure the kitchen was stocked with food, and that she had everything she needed, but he was careful to give her space, only checking in with occasional texts or brief visits. Leah approached her transformation methodically. First came practical matters: a visit to the doctor for a checkup, a dentist appointment, a haircut. Peter offered to hire a personal stylist for her wedding outfit, but Leah insisted on selecting her own clothes. "I was a designer, remember?" she'd said. "I know what works." Peter gave her access to an account for expenses, but noticed she spent carefully, selecting quality pieces that could be used beyond the wedding weekend. She chose a simple but elegant midnight blue gown for the main event, and practical but stylish clothes for the other activities. As the wedding weekend approached, Peter found himself increasingly nervous. Not about what Victoria or others would think. He realized he cared less about that than he'd expected, but about Leah's comfort. He wanted her to feel at ease, not like an exhibit. The day before they were set to leave, he stopped by her apartment. She opened the door looking more rested and healthy than he'd seen her before, her dark hair shining, her face free of the tension that had become so familiar. "Come in," she said. "I've just finished packing." The apartment was spotless, with a single suitcase waiting by the door. On the dining table lay sketches, dozens of them, of clothing designs. "You've been working," Peter observed, picking up one of the drawings. It showed an elegant jacket with unique detailing along the sleeves. Leah nodded. "Ideas have been coming back. When you're not worried about where you'll sleep or what you'll eat, creativity has room to breathe." "These are incredible." She shrugged, but looked pleased. "Just getting back into practice. Have you thought about what's next?" "After the wedding?" "One step at a time," she said. "But yes, I've been researching small business loans, looking at what it would take to start over. I've learned a lot from failing the first time." Peter nodded, respecting her independence. "The car will be here at 9 tomorrow morning. I'll be ready." As he turned to leave, Leah called his name. He looked back to find her expression serious. "Thank you, Peter. Not just for the material things, but for seeing me when I was invisible." The simple sincerity of her words moved him more than he expected. "I should be thanking you for reminding me what matters." The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Peter waited in the lobby, checking his watch. At precisely 9 o'clock, Leah emerged from the elevator. The change in her went beyond the new clothes or styled hair. She carried herself differently, with the confidence of someone who knew her own worth. "Ready for this?" Peter asked as they walked to the waiting car. Leah took a deep breath and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." As the driver loaded their luggage and they settled into the back seat, Peter noticed Leah clutching a small portfolio. "What's that?" he asked. "Some of my designs," she replied. "You mentioned the Hayes family owns hotels. I thought perhaps they might be interested in looking at some uniform concepts, something that sets their properties apart." Peter felt a rush of admiration for her initiative. Always thinking like a businesswoman. "Just making the most of an opportunity," she said with a small smile. "Isn't that what we're both doing?" As the car pulled away from the curb and headed out of the city, Peter couldn't help but wonder how this weekend would unfold. He glanced at Leah, who was gazing out the window with a mixture of nervousness and determination. Whatever happened at the wedding, he realized, something important had already changed for both of them. The drive to the Hamptons took nearly 3 hours. As they left the congestion of the city behind, the landscape opened up to reveal sprawling estates nestled among bare winter trees. Leah pressed her face close to the window, taking in the changing scenery. "Have you been to the Hamptons before?" Peter asked. Leah shook her head. "No, I've seen it in magazines and movies, but never in person." She paused, then added with a small smile, "It looks exactly like I imagined. Beautiful and completely detached from reality." Peter laughed. "That's a perfect description." As they drove through the gates of the Hayes estate, even Peter felt a flicker of intimidation. The property was massive. A main house that looked more like a small hotel than a home, surrounded by manicured gardens and auxiliary buildings. Despite the winter season, the grounds were immaculate, with heated tents set up near the main house for the weekend's events. "This is where we're staying?" Leah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Peter replied. "This is where the ceremony and reception will be held. We're staying at the guest house." The driver followed a winding path to a smaller, though still impressive house about half a mile from the main property. As they pulled up, a staff member emerged to greet them. "Mr. Reynolds, welcome," the young man said. "I'm Alex. I'll be assisting you during your stay. Ms. Victoria asked me to inform you that there's a welcome cocktail hour at the main house at 6 this evening." Peter nodded his thanks as the driver removed their luggage from the trunk. "And this is my friend Leah Collins." Alex turned to Leah with the same professional courtesy. "Welcome, Ms. Collins. Please let me know if you need anything during your stay." Inside, the guest house was warm and inviting despite its size. A fire burned in the stone fireplace of the main sitting room, and fresh flowers brightened every table. "Your rooms are upstairs," Alex informed them. "First 2 doors on the right. Dinner will be served at 8 if you choose not to attend the cocktail hour. Is there anything else you need?" "We're fine, thank you," Peter said. Once alone, Leah walked slowly around the sitting room, her fingers trailing over the back of an expensive leather armchair. "This is just the guest house," she murmured, more to herself than to Peter. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. She turned to him, determination replacing the momentary awe on her face. "Not at all, just taking it in." She picked up her suitcase. "I should get settled before this cocktail thing." Peter watched her climb the stairs, admiring her composure. Many people would be completely overwhelmed by the opulence, but Leah seemed to be cataloging everything with a designer's eye rather than being intimidated by it. When Leah came downstairs an hour later, Peter felt his breath catch. She wore a simple but elegant black dress that fit her perfectly, with a deep green scarf draped artfully around her shoulders. Her hair was pulled back in a stylish knot, and she'd applied just enough makeup to enhance her features without looking overdone. "You look amazing," he said honestly. "It's just a simple dress," she replied, but he could tell she was pleased. "Found it on sale last week. The scarf is actually from my old collection, one of the few pieces I kept when everything fell apart." "It's beautiful," Peter said. "Ready to face the lions?" Leah took a deep breath and nodded. "As I'll ever be." They walked to the main house, the winter air crisp around them. Leah slipped slightly on a patch of ice, and Peter caught her arm to steady her. She didn't pull away immediately, and they continued with her hand resting lightly in the crook of his elbow. The cocktail hour was in full swing when they arrived. The large room buzzed with conversation and laughter, guests dressed impeccably as they mingled with drinks in hand. Peter felt Leah stiffen slightly beside him as several heads turned their way. "Just breathe," he whispered. "Remember, you have as much right to be here as anyone." Before she could respond, a tall woman with perfectly styled blonde hair approached them, her smile wide but not quite reaching her eyes. "Peter." "You came," she said, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "I wasn't sure you would." "Victoria," he greeted her. "Congratulations on your engagement. This is my friend, Leah Collins." Victoria's gaze moved to Leah, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before her social mask slipped back into place. "Lovely to meet you, Leah. Welcome to our little gathering." "Congratulations on your wedding," Leah said warmly. "The estate is beautiful." "Yes, it's been in Dylan's family for generations," Victoria replied, her eyes already scanning the room over Leah's shoulder. "You simply must meet Dylan. He's somewhere. Oh, there he is by the bar. Excuse me." As Victoria glided away, Leah gave Peter a knowing look. "So that's the ex." "That's her," Peter confirmed. "She's exactly what I expected," Leah said. "Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect emptiness." Peter couldn't help but laugh. "That's harsh but not entirely unfair. Let's get a drink." As they made their way through the crowd, Peter felt the curious glances and whispers. He was used to being talked about in these circles, but tonight felt different. With Leah beside him, the gossip felt less important somehow. They had just reached the bar when a booming voice called out, "Reynolds, you old dog, where have you been hiding?" Peter turned to see Thomas Walker, a venture capitalist he'd known for years, approaching with a martini in hand. "Tom," Peter greeted him. "Good to see you." "This is Leah Collins." Tom's eyes widened appreciatively as he took Leah's hand. "Enchanté, my dear. And how did you and Peter meet?" Before Peter could answer, Leah spoke. "Through work," she said smoothly. "I'm a designer." "Fashion?" Tom asked, looking at her dress with new interest. "Yes," Leah confirmed, "though I'm currently between collections. Well, you must give me your card. My wife is always looking for new designers to support." Leah smiled politely. "I'd be delighted to once my new line launches." As the evening progressed, Leah handled each introduction with the same poised confidence. She was honest about her background as a designer, but vague about her current circumstances. No one seemed to question her presence. She carried herself with such natural elegance that she blended seamlessly into the wealthy crowd. Peter found himself watching her with growing admiration. At one point, he overheard her discussing sustainable textiles with the wife of a prominent banker, the woman hanging on her every word. "Your friend is quite the hit," a familiar voice said beside him. Peter turned to find Dylan Hayes, Victoria's fiancé, offering him a fresh whiskey. "Leah's remarkable," Peter agreed, accepting the drink. Dylan nodded thoughtfully. "Victoria was worried it would be awkward having you here, but I insisted. Business is business, after all, and our companies will need to work together in the future." "I appreciate the invitation," Peter said diplomatically. "No hard feelings on my part." Dylan clapped him on the shoulder. "Good man. And between us, I think you've traded up," he added with a meaningful glance toward Leah. Peter felt a flash of irritation. "Leah's a friend, not a commodity to be compared." Dylan raised an eyebrow, then shrugged. "My mistake. Still, she's made quite an impression. My father's been talking to her about hotel uniform designs for the past 20 minutes. Peter followed Dylan's gaze to where Leah stood with an older man who could only be Richard Hayes, the family patriarch. Leah had her portfolio open, pointing to something on one of the pages while Richard nodded with interest. The cocktail hour eventually transitioned to a casual dinner. Peter and Leah found themselves seated at a table with couples they didn't know, which proved to be a blessing. Without the pressure of acquaintances, they could relax and enjoy the excellent food. "How are you holding up?" Peter asked quietly as dessert was served. Leah took a small bite of chocolate cake before answering. "Better than I expected. Everyone's been surprisingly nice." "That's because you've impressed them," Peter said. "Did I see you showing your designs to Richard Hayes?" A smile spread across Leah's face. "He asked to see my portfolio after I mentioned I'd designed hotel uniforms before. He actually liked my ideas, said they were fresh but practical." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "He wants me to email him more detailed sketches next week." "That's fantastic," Peter said, genuinely pleased for her. "It might be nothing," Leah cautioned, but her tone was hopeful. "But it's a foot in the door." As they walked back to the guest house later that night, a comfortable silence settled between them. The sky was clear, stars visible in a way they never were in the city. Leah tilted her head back to look at them, her breath creating small clouds in the cold air. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said finally. "I should be thanking you," Peter replied. "You made tonight much easier than it would have been." Leah stopped walking and turned to face him. "Can I ask you something? The real reason you invited me, was it to make Victoria jealous?" Peter considered the question carefully. "Initially, maybe that was part of it," he admitted. "But now I'm just glad you're here. For yourself, not as some kind of statement." Leah studied his face in the moonlight as if searching for deception. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded and resumed walking. "Tomorrow's the actual wedding," she said. "Are you ready for that?" Peter realized somewhat to his surprise that he was. "Yes," he said. "I think I finally am." Morning light filtered through the curtains of the guest house, waking Leah earlier than she'd intended. For a moment she lay still, disoriented by the softness of the bed and the unfamiliar silence. No traffic noise, no sounds of people in the shelter stirring. Just quiet broken only by occasional birdsong. She slipped out of bed and went to the window. The Hayes estate spread out before her, bathed in the golden glow of sunrise. In just a few hours, it would transform into the venue for what the other guests had been calling the society wedding of the year. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. "Leah? Are you awake?" Peter's voice was low, careful not to disturb her if she was still sleeping. "Yes, come in," she called, tightening the belt of the plush robe she'd found in the bathroom. Peter entered, already dressed in casual clothes, holding a tray with coffee and pastries. "I thought you might want breakfast up here. It's going to be a busy day." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. "Thank you. That's very kind. Did you sleep well?" he asked, setting the tray on a small table near the window. "Better than I have in months," she admitted, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "It's strange how quickly you can get used to luxury, and how quickly you can take it for granted," Peter added, looking out at the view. "The wedding's at 4. There's a lunch for close friends at noon, but we weren't invited to that, thankfully. So we have the morning free?" Peter nodded. "I thought we could walk around the grounds if you'd like. It's cold but clear." An hour later, they were strolling through the Hayes Estate's extensive gardens. Even in winter, the landscape was meticulously maintained with evergreen hedges and stone pathways leading to small gazebos and statues. "I've been meaning to ask," Peter said as they walked. "What happened with your design business? You mentioned it failed during the downturn, but you're obviously talented." Leah was quiet for a moment, her breath visible in the cold air. "It wasn't just the economy, though. That was part of it. I made mistakes, expanded too quickly, trusted the wrong people with production. That happens to a lot of small businesses," Peter said. "Yes, but there was more." She paused by a frozen fountain, tracing the ice with her fingertip. "I had a potential investor, a major department store buyer who could have changed everything. But when I met with him to discuss terms," Peter could guess where this was going. "He wanted more than a business relationship," Leah nodded. "When I refused, he not only backed out but spread rumors about my reliability. In fashion, your reputation is everything. Orders dried up. My small cash reserve was depleted, covering fixed costs. And then I got sick, pneumonia, with no health insurance. And the rest was a downward spiral," Peter finished softly. "It happens faster than people realize," she said. "From respected designer to homeless in under 8 months." They continued walking in silence, Peter absorbing the weight of her story. It wasn't unusual. He'd heard similar accounts from others at the shelter, but something about Leah's quiet dignity in the face of such injustice moved him deeply. "The man who did that to you," he finally said. "What was his name?" Leah gave him a sharp look. "Why, so you can confront him? This isn't a fairy tale, Peter." "No, but I know people in the industry. Names matter." She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's in the past. Today I'm focusing on the future, starting with Richard Hayes potentially looking at my designs." Peter respected her decision not to name the man, though he made a mental note to do some discreet research later. As they rounded a bend in the path, they came upon a flurry of activity near one of the heated tents. Florists were unloading trucks of arrangements, and staff hurried back and forth with linens and decorations. "The wedding machine in action," Peter observed. They were about to turn back when a harried-looking woman with a clipboard spotted them and hurried over. "Thank goodness, are you the backup florists?" she asked, breathless with stress. "The centerpiece delivery is missing 12 arrangements." "No, sorry," Peter began, but Leah interrupted. "What's the problem exactly?" she asked. The woman, who introduced herself as Megan, the wedding planner's assistant, explained that some of the centerpieces hadn't arrived, and they were now scrambling to fill 12 tables. "What materials do you have available?" Leah asked. Megan looked surprised but led them to the tent where extra flowers and supplies were stored. "We have these, but not enough of the special orchids that were supposed to be in each centerpiece." Leah surveyed the materials, her designer's mind clearly at work. "I think I can help. I used to style photo shoots for my clothing line." Peter watched in amazement as Leah began to reorganize the available flowers and greenery, creating new arrangement concepts that didn't require the missing orchids. She directed Megan and 2 florist assistants, her hands moving confidently as she demonstrated what she wanted. "These branches here with just a few of the roses. Then wrap this silk ribbon from the favor boxes around the base," she instructed. "It will echo the invitation design I saw in the main house." Within an hour, Leah had designed a solution and helped complete 4 sample centerpieces that were, in Peter's opinion, more interesting than the original design he'd glimpsed earlier. Victoria's mother appeared just as they were finishing, her face tight with worry until she saw the new arrangements. Her expression transformed to delight. "These are lovely. Different from what we planned, but actually more elegant," she said, touching one of the arrangements gently. "Who did these?" Megan pointed to Leah. "This guest solved our problem. She's a designer." Mrs. Bennet approached Leah with new interest. "You saved the day. Are you with the wedding party?" "I'm a friend of Peter Reynolds," Leah explained, wiping her hands on a cloth. Recognition flickered across Mrs. Bennet's face. "Ah, Victoria's, yes," she recovered quickly. "Well, we're indebted to you, Ms. Collins." "Leah Collins." Mrs. Bennet nodded, clearly filing the name away. "I must get back to Victoria. The bride is a bit stressed, as you can imagine. But thank you, truly." As she hurried away, Megan squeezed Leah's arm gratefully. "You're a lifesaver." "I was about to have a breakdown." "Happy to help," Leah said. "Sometimes limitations lead to better creative solutions." Walking back to the guest house to prepare for the ceremony, Peter couldn't help but marvel at Leah's ability to turn a potential disaster into an opportunity to shine. "You were incredible back there," he said. Leah smiled, looking more relaxed than she had since they'd arrived. "It felt good to create something again, to have my ideas valued. They'd be fools not to value your ideas." When they reached the guest house, they parted to get ready for the wedding. Peter found himself strangely nervous as he put on his tuxedo. Not about seeing Victoria get married, that no longer bothered him, but about the evening ahead with Leah. At precisely 3:30, he went downstairs to wait for her. When she appeared at the top of the stairs, Peter felt his heart skip a beat. Leah wore the midnight blue gown she'd selected, its simple lines accentuating her slender figure. Her hair was swept up, revealing the elegant line of her neck, and she'd added only a pair of small silver earrings as accessories. "You look breathtaking," Peter said, meaning every word. Leah blushed slightly. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." The ceremony was held in the estate's small chapel, a stone building dating back to the early 1900s. Despite the cold, the space was warm, filled with candles and the heady scent of flowers. Peter and Leah slipped into seats near the back, where they had a view of the gathered guests, about 100 of New York's wealthiest and most connected individuals. As the music began and the wedding party processed down the aisle, Peter found himself watching Leah's reactions rather than the ceremony. She observed everything with interest, but he noticed her gaze often return to the architectural details of the space or the construction of the bridesmaids' gowns. Victoria made a beautiful bride, of course. When she appeared at the chapel entrance on her father's arm, a collective murmur of appreciation rippled through the guests. Peter waited for some twinge of regret or loss, but it didn't come. Instead, he felt a surprising sense of closure. Leah must have sensed his thoughts because she reached over and briefly squeezed his hand. The simple gesture of support meant more to him than she could know. The reception that followed was held in the largest of the heated tents, transformed into a winter wonderland with white flowers, crystal decorations, and thousands of twinkling lights. Leah's centerpieces graced each table, their unique design drawing compliments from guests. During dinner, they were seated with Richard Hayes and his wife, along with two other couples. To Peter's delight, Richard spent much of the meal discussing hotel design concepts with Leah, who explained her ideas with growing confidence. "We need to modernize our staff uniforms across all properties," Richard was saying. "Something distinctive but practical. Your concepts are exactly what I've been looking for, contemporary but with respect for tradition. I believe uniforms should reflect your brand's heritage while looking forward," Leah replied. "Your staff are walking ambassadors for the Hayes experience." Richard nodded approvingly. "I'd like you to come to my office next week. Bring a full proposal. If it's as good as what I've seen, we could be talking about a significant contract." Peter watched as Leah maintained her composure, though he could see the excitement in her eyes. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Hayes." As the meal ended and dancing began, Peter leaned close to whisper, "Looks like you've made quite an impression." Leah's smile was radiant. "It feels like a dream. This morning I was just grateful for a warm bed, and now I might have my first client. The first of many," Peter said confidently. "Would you like to dance?" They moved onto the dance floor as the band played a slow, romantic standard. Peter was acutely aware of Leah's hand in his, the subtle scent of her perfume, the way she fit perfectly in his arms as they swayed to the music. "Peter," she said quietly, looking up at him, "what happens after this weekend?" It was the question he'd been asking himself since yesterday. "What do you want to happen?" "I want to stand on my own feet again," she said. "To rebuild my life through my own efforts." "And where do I fit into that picture?" he asked, his heart beating faster. Before she could answer, a commotion near the entrance to the tent caught their attention. Raised voices cut through the music, causing the band to falter. Everyone turned to look as a man in an expensive but rumpled suit pushed past the staff, trying to restrain him. "I'm on the guest list," he was insisting loudly. "Bennett party?" Peter felt Leah stiffen in his arms. Her face had gone pale. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarmed by her reaction. Leah's eyes were fixed on the latecomer with an expression of shock and something like fear. "It's him," she whispered. "The investor who destroyed my business. Gregory Wilson." The wedding reception seemed to freeze as Gregory Wilson stumbled further into the tent. He was clearly intoxicated, his tie loose and hair disheveled. Victoria's father quickly intercepted him, speaking in hushed but firm tones as he tried to guide the unwelcome guest away from the celebration. "I need to leave," Leah whispered, her face pale. She pulled away from Peter and began moving toward the exit on the opposite side of the tent. Peter followed, concerned by the fear in her eyes. "Leah, wait." They had almost reached the exit when Richard Hayes appeared beside them. "Is everything all right? You both look like you've seen a ghost." Peter glanced at Leah, unsure how much to share. She took a deep breath, visibly steadying herself. "Mr. Hayes, the man who just arrived, Gregory Wilson, I have a history with him, a professional history that ended badly." Richard's expression darkened. "Wilson? He's Victoria's mother's cousin, always causing trouble." He studied Leah's face. "What did he do to you?" Leah hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "He destroyed my business after I rejected his advances. Spread rumors that cost me contracts and my reputation." Richard's eyes narrowed. "That sounds like Wilson. He's done similar things to others." He looked toward where security was now escorting Gregory from the tent. "Would you feel comfortable telling me the full story?" "Not now, but perhaps at our meeting next week." "Why?" Leah asked cautiously. "Because if what you're saying is true, and I believe it is, I'd like to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Wilson has business connections to some of our properties. I prefer not to work with men of that character." Before Leah could respond, a commotion erupted near the main entrance. Gregory had broken free from the security guards and was now scanning the room, his gaze erratic until it landed on Leah. His face contorted with recognition. "You," he shouted, pointing. "The ungrateful little designer." The music stopped completely. Every guest turned to stare, first at Gregory, then following his gesture to Leah. Peter instinctively stepped slightly in front of her, but Leah gently moved him aside. She stood tall, her midnight blue gown catching the light as she faced her accuser. Gregory lurched forward, stopped by two security guards who grabbed his arms. "You think you can just show up here? In this crowd?" His voice was slurred but loud enough for everyone to hear. "After what I offered you? I made you, and when you refused me, I broke you. Just like that." He snapped his fingers clumsily. A shocked murmur rippled through the guests. Victoria, standing nearby with her new husband, looked mortified. "Mr. Wilson," Richard Hayes said, stepping forward, his voice carrying the authority of his position, "you need to leave now. Do you know who this woman is?" Gregory sneered, ignoring Richard. "She was nothing before I found her designs. I offered her everything, money, connections, success. All she had to do was show proper appreciation." The emphasis he placed on the last word made its meaning clear to everyone. "That's enough." Richard's voice was like a whip, but Leah raised her hand slightly. "It's all right, Mr. Hayes." She walked forward until she stood just a few feet from Gregory, her posture composed despite the tremor Peter could see in her hands. "Yes, Mr. Wilson, I refused your help 4 years ago," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I refused to sleep with you to secure a business deal. And yes, you destroyed my company, blacklisted me in the industry, and cost me everything I'd built." She paused, looking around the room. "I ended up homeless, designing in notebooks at public libraries while staying at shelters." The room was completely silent now. Even Gregory seemed stunned by her candor. "But here's what you didn't know," Leah continued. "You didn't destroy my talent. You didn't take my dignity. And you didn't stop me permanently." She gestured to Richard Hayes. I've just been offered a design contract with Hayes Hotels, based solely on the merit of my work. Gregory's face flushed with anger. You think anyone will hire you After you what? Richard interrupted. After you admit to blacklisting a talented designer because she wouldn't sleep with you? I believe that's called sexual harassment, possibly extortion. He turned to the crowd. Did everyone hear that admission? I certainly did. Several guests nodded, some pulling out phones as if to confirm they had recordings. Gregory's face drained of color as he seemed to realize what he'd done. Victoria's father stepped forward. Wilson, you're not just leaving this reception. You're leaving my property. Now. He nodded to the security guards who began forcibly removing Gregory. As they dragged him out, Gregory shouted over his shoulder, She's nobody. She was living on the streets before Reynolds picked her up. Ask her. The doors closed behind him, leaving an awkward silence. All eyes were on Leah, who stood perfectly still, her face flushed but determined. Peter moved to her side, taking her hand. She squeezed it gratefully but didn't look away from the crowd. Yes, she said clearly. I was homeless until recently. I lost everything after Mr. Wilson blacklisted me. But that doesn't define who I am or what I can create. Richard Hayes broke the silence with applause. His wife joined in, then others, until most of the room was clapping. Peter watched in amazement as something remarkable happened. Instead of rejection, Leah was receiving respect. Victoria's mother approached, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and admiration. I'm mortified by my cousin's behavior. Please accept my deepest apologies. Even Victoria came over, looking genuinely disturbed. I had no idea Gregory was like that. I'm so sorry this happened at our wedding. The band began playing again, a gentle melody to ease the tension. Gradually, the reception resumed, though Peter noticed many guests approaching Leah with business cards and words of support. Are you okay? He asked when they finally had a moment alone. Leah's hands were shaking, but her eyes were clear. I think so. I can't believe I stood up to him like that. You were magnificent, Peter said. Richard Hayes rejoined them, his wife at his side. Ms. Collins, I'd like to move our meeting to Monday if that works for you. And I'm not just interested in uniforms anymore. We have a new boutique hotel concept that needs a complete design vision. Clothing, textiles, staff look. A full creative direction. Leah blinked in surprise. That would be incredible. After what I witnessed tonight, I know you have not just talent but integrity and courage. Those are rare qualities. Richard handed her his card. My direct line. Call on Monday to set up the details. As the Hayes moved away, Peter felt a surge of pride for Leah that almost overwhelmed him. This is just the beginning for you, he said softly. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. They danced, talked with guests, and even shared a laugh with Victoria and her new husband. By the time they returned to the guest house shortly after midnight, Leah was exhausted but glowing with a new confidence. They stood in the hallway between their rooms, neither quite ready to say goodnight after such an extraordinary day. Thank you, Leah said, for bringing me here, for believing in me. I never expected any of this. I didn't do anything, Peter replied honestly. You did this. I just had the good fortune to witness it. Leah shook her head. You saw me when I was invisible. You treated me with respect when I had nothing. That changed everything. The air between them felt charged with possibility. Peter wanted to kiss her but hesitated, not wanting to overstep. Peter, Leah said softly, about your question earlier. Where do you fit in my future? I don't know exactly, but I'd like to find out, properly, slowly, as equals. Equal sounds perfect, he said. I've never met anyone like you, Leah. She smiled, then leaned up and kissed him gently on the cheek. Good night, Peter, and thank you for the strangest, most wonderful weekend of my life. Good night, he whispered as she disappeared into her room. Peter stood in the hallway a moment longer, reflecting on how differently this weekend had turned out than he'd expected. He'd invited Leah hoping to make a statement to his ex, but instead had witnessed a woman reclaiming her life and dignity. And somehow in the process he'd found something he hadn't realized he was missing. A connection that felt real in a way his world of wealth and status rarely did. 1 year later, launch party for Leah Collins Designs filled the rooftop garden of the newest Hayes Hotel. String lights twinkled overhead as models showcased not just the hotel's New uniforms, but Leah's complete first collection since her comeback. Peter watched from the side as she moved confidently through the crowd, discussing her designs with fashion critics and buyers. Her company, started with a loan she'd insisted on paying back to Peter with interest, had grown faster than anyone expected. The Hayes contract had opened doors, but it was Leah's talent and determination that had rebuilt her reputation. "Quite a turnaround," Victoria said, appearing beside him with a champagne flute in hand. Their paths crossed occasionally at events like this, their past relationship now a distant memory. "She's extraordinary," Peter agreed. "And you two? Still taking it slow?" Victoria asked with genuine curiosity. Peter smiled. "Some things shouldn't be rushed." Across the room, Leah caught his eye and smiled, excusing herself from her conversation to join him. "The buyer from Neiman's just placed an order," she said excitedly, taking his hand. "And Richard wants to expand the contract to all Hayes properties." "I'm not surprised," Peter said. "You're just getting started." Leah looked around at the crowded rooftop, then back at Peter. "Sometimes I still can't believe it. From a shelter cot to this in 1 year." "Believe it," he said, squeezing her hand. "Though I do miss serving eggs with you sometimes," Leah laughed. "We still volunteer there every Tuesday, remember? Some things shouldn't change." The evening breeze carried the sounds of the city below, a reminder of where they'd started and how far they'd come. Not just Leah's rise from homelessness to success, but Peter's journey from emptiness to purpose. They had found in each other not a fairy tale romance, but something better, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine connection. As they stood together overlooking the city lights, Peter realized that the wedding that had brought them together had given him an unexpected gift. Not revenge or closure, but a chance to see beyond the surface of his privileged world to what truly mattered, and for that he would always be grateful.